Ladies and gentlemen, angry Americans around the country and around the globe, this is going to be fun. Our first ever returning champion, our first ever returning, inspiring, iconic, important guest, a man of the moment, a friend of the Angry Americans podcast, a member of the Righteous Media family, an incredible patriot, and one of the most fun people to talk to and follow on Twitter. The great and powerful Ron Perlman returns to Angry Americans.
Just so you know, I was angry before it was cool.
You were angry long before it was cool.
Lower middle class Jew, it's a birthright. We're all angry. For good reason.
And maybe have you ever been trending on Twitter before, Ron?
Maybe. I think one other time. But this was an uninvited delight that what happened to me. Maybe it was a little invited. Maybe there was a little provocation there when I go back into the annals of what went down. But no, this was unexpected. Sheep walking right into the den.
I told you when we were talking yesterday on the phone, it was like they walked into your booby trap, and I want to get to that in a second.
Okay.
But
I'll hold off. It's really hard for me to like.
We're gonna let it fly.
Try to show some control, Paul.
We're gonna let it fly. We're gonna let it fly. But first off, you joined us back on episode. You joined us back on episode 3. Right. You were one of my very first guests when we launched this podcast. Last time we spoke, we were in your car driving through Los Angeles. I want to thank you for being an early supporter and an early guest. Now it's about, a little more than a year later. You've been on Instagram Live with me. We've been collaborating on Twitter. We're staying in touch. But I want to welcome you back. And usually I have a set of questions I ask guests in the first time they join us. And I'm going to mix it up a little bit for returning guests. So I want to ask you a question. Usually I ask folks, what's your favorite drink? I want to ask you, what's your favorite band, Ron Perlman? That's a hard thing to pick, but artist or band, if you had to pick one, what would it be?
Quintet.
Say it again?
Miles Davis Quintet, when it was John Coltrane, Cannonball Adderley, Bill Evans, I believe Philly Joe Jones, and I should know the name of it. Paul Chambers, I think, was on bass. And they only recorded 2 or 3 things together, but those were the greatest jazz albums, in the history of the medium. And so, I'm always going to disappoint you because I know you're looking for rock and roll.
No. This is like the car question, Ron. There is no bad answer. There is no disappointing answer. That is a beautiful answer. It's an insight into who you are. It's a reflection of what a Renaissance man you are. What a learned man you are. And I think recently, an underestimated man. You are very politically active. We talked about it when you joined us last time. You're one of my favorite people to follow on Twitter. You are an incredible patriot. You care deeply about your country and about our communities and about your states and the home, New York and California, the places you live and work. But folks, maybe they were living under a rock, but last Sunday morning, I believe, America woke up to a headline they probably didn't expect, but you and Florida Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz in a Twitter fight, in a Twitter fight. So I want to unpack that. You're joining me pretty much exclusively. I don't know if you've been talking to other folks, but I want to walk through that because it's an insight into our times. It's an insight into our politics. It's entertaining as shit. It doesn't seem to be over, but you were trending on Twitter because you were in a Twitter battle with another political actor. And why I want to talk to you is because I want to talk as much as possible to people who are in the arena. And this is a time when everybody's got to get in the arena, and everybody's in the arena in different ways. Whether you're running for Congress, you're out in the streets, or you're trying to push information on Twitter. But you got into it with Matt Gaetz. So can you explain to me? So you posted a tweet on Saturday night, the 13th. And you said the U.S. soccer team called, and you guessed it, they couldn't give less of a fuck about what you two dipshits think. And you tagged Donald Trump and Matt Gaetz. because they were criticizing the women's soccer team, right?
I think they were criticizing the soccer, whatever the governing body is for the U.S. soccer team, because I guess they came down with a decision that it was not mandatory to stand for the national anthem, and that no one would be punished who felt like they cared to express themselves in their, that reflected their own individual values. So that was their tweet. I'm not sure. I think Gaetz initiated it, but he was including his dear asshole buddy, and I use the word asshole advisedly, our dear POTUS, in that sentiment. And I think his tweet was something like, I'd rather not have a soccer team than have a soccer team that won't stand for our national anthem. So,
thank you for
little low-hanging fruit there, and I've never been one to, not swing at a hanging curveball.
And so the hanging curveball is out there, or he kind of, maybe he bit on the knuckleball. We could use sports analogies all day long, but then he tweeted at you at 10:43 on Sunday morning, I believe. The 14th was Sunday morning. I'm reconstructing this political moment. And then he wrote, this racial justice warrior had no problem in Hollywood portraying the white supremacist leader of a motorcycle gang. And then he used the hashtag SOA for Sons of Anarchy. And then you wrote back, yes, sir. I'm not going to do your voice. Yes, sir. So true. So rewarding playing assholes on TV. Tell me, sir, how is it actually being one? And then it was on. So can you tell us, what was your Sunday morning like? What was going on here behind the scenes?
I mean, I was expecting, like most days during, the time of life at the time of Corona, to have a kind of a low key, no impact, Sunday morning, maybe get dressed by around 12:30. I never expected that. This was like the greatest, most beautifully wrapped Christmas present you've ever received. And I didn't know I was going to write, like, tell me, sir, what's it like to actually be one, meaning asshole. It just came out. And, you think twice when you want to, like, be that direct and engage with somebody, no matter what you think about him. But Jesus, if anybody had it coming, it's this fucking tool, Matt Gaetz. I mean, he is such a fucking tool, and he's such a little bitch, and he's such a pussy, and he's so representative of everything that is indicative of the decay and the cynicism that is this growing malaise that is enshrouded in what things that we should be caring about as a nation. But there's a group of guys that have, taken upon themselves to use as, what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, I think that the action of guys like Gaetz is to deliberately be provocative, to deliberately stoke division and hatred, and to deliberately dismantle anything that doesn't keep them in positions of power and wealth. And everything else about the American experiment, this great, beautiful, wonderful, ugly, messy malaise that we find ourselves in, which, as Winston Churchill once said, democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others.
Right.
And here we have guys that, this is their technique, is to make us disgusted with the things that we should be you know, holding near and dear to our hearts and fighting and dying for.
I think that's why people rallied behind this. And just to set, you know, the context here, your response to him got 360,000 likes, right? That's more than some cable news shows get for ratings. 51,000 retweets, and this became, you know, a publicly watched fight, right? And I think Gaetz, for folks who don't know, is probably more of a water carrier for Trump than just about anybody in the administration. But he's also seems to be constantly wearing that mantle of the provocateur. I think he's hosted, has he filled in for Hannity at times, or he's on Fox a lot. It looks like he's always kind of positioning for a TV spot, right? He wants to be a bomb thrower. He doesn't seem to be a serious policymaker. I read that he actually grew up in the house where the Truman Show was filmed. So his entire life is kind of this display. And do you think, Ron, that he thought, like, this kind of is like a guy picking a fight with somebody thinking they can take him and underestimating him? And maybe, you know, frankly, you know, he's like 38 years old, you're 70. It's like one of those videos you watch on YouTube when a young guy picks a fight with an old dude, and the old dude is patient and just turns around and clocks him and floors him. Like, that's what it felt like. I think that's why America stood up. And I don't think he knew who he was messing with. I also don't think he knew your popularity across partisan lines. Like, you know, he's trying to label you and we'll get to it. He tries to label you, you know, a left-wing liberal. You're not Sean Penn. You're not, you know, your audience isn't Taylor Swift. Like, you know, your audience is really diverse. I would probably venture to say it's probably majority male. It's a lot of people in Florida and in red states and in blue states and from all different backgrounds. But you're probably closest to his base than anybody when it comes to the audience that follows you, right?
I don't know. I think that he felt like he was able to, you know what drafting is when you're in Formula One, you get behind the guy who's in the lead and you just, you know, you use his forward thrust to just, you know, you have a sandwich while he's doing all the work, you know.
Yeah.
I think that he was going to take the Sons of Anarchy kind of brand and, you know, mine that for some strange, twisted, self-serving thing. You know, I think that he saw some bright, shiny object in going after somebody who, you know, is so representative of a certain kind of point of view in you know, in our culture, playing of a Hell's Angels-like organization, which he termed as white supremacist. And we were racist, but we weren't white supremacists. So he even had that wrong. But
and so you wrote, you know, this goes on, right?
Oh, it goes on. That's the sick part about it.
Yeah, this goes on. I wish maybe, you know, next time we do this, you can actually read your tweets in your voice.
No, you're doing better than me.
I can't do it justice. But, you know, at some point he writes back and says, honestly, the fact that Hollywood thinks I'm an asshole is a badge of honor. You wouldn't be tweeting about me if my message weren't true and effective, threatens your wokeness. How triggered will you be when Donald Trump is reelected? More or less when Crooked lost. More or less than when Crooked lost. And then you wrote back, speaking of woke, Matty, caps, do you think it's just Hollywood that thinks you're an asshole? I'll read the comments. I'll wait. And while we're at it, fuckboy, what is this shit about playing your crowd with dog whistles like Hollywood, making them think culture is the thing that's keeping them down when it's really you and your greed? Now, again, 50,000 people are liking these tweets and everyone is watching. What's going on in your house or head when this is happening?
I mean, this is like, you know, I can't tell you, you know, like, I may have trouble recounting it now because I'm even salivating now. You think I'm salivating now? You should have seen me Sunday. Because the thing of it is that, and, you know, if you go down one or two tweets later, you know, he keeps coming at me, even though it's clear he should have known, dude, this is, you know, you can only look bad.
Right.
You know, there's no win in this one. You can only look bad. This guy clearly doesn't give a fuck what he says. He doesn't give a fuck what anybody thinks. And he's taking you out like Chinese food. And yet he keeps coming. And so at one point I wrote to him, Are you really still here, bro? I mean,
yeah, he said what he wrote is, dude, and now if we're at 5:00 now, so it's going on throughout Sunday. There's no football. NASCAR was delayed, so everybody's watching. And it says, dude, I represent a district of 700K that elected me with about 2/3 of the vote the last 3 times I've been on the ballot. Wasn't his father a politician? And he, speaking of drafting, I think his father had been a politician and he drafted off his father. So that's one issue. But then he said, blue check marks don't scare me any more than your fictional white supremacy motorcycle gang. Leave the tough guy comments for those of us who faced voters. Now, this is vintage where he calls you a blue check, but he's a blue check, right? Meaning he's verified by Twitter. And then you wrote back, Matt, you really want to keep going? I've been schooling you all day. I'll school you all night. Let me know. And then you wrote back, you know what? You're right. A guy who wins a totally gerrymandered district with daddy's money deserves our deepest admiration. You're right. I only play scumbags and grifters. You're the real deal. That one got 65,000 likes. So your ratings are through the roof here.
Pretty clever stuff now that I think about it.
Very clever. Very, very clever. And then, just to shape this up, P.S., you said you're lucky for this guy, Matt. If it weren't for him, you'd be the ugliest politician walking. Talking about Jim
Jordan.
Thank you, Jeff Jordan. Jeff Jordan.
Jordan, the guy who doesn't deign to wear a sports jacket,
Right. And then he keeps coming at you. He says, gerrymandered district, the western and northern borders of my district are in Alabama, where he was rumored to have been considering a run for the Senate. And he said, the southern boundary is the Gulf of Mexico. It's utterly impossible to gerrymander, try again. And then you wrote back, which I really want to give you a chance to talk about. You wrote, try again. Dude, you brought a Holocaust denier to the State of the Union. Doesn't get sicker than that. Buzz off, punk. It's past your bedtime. So this is building toward, the tap in of the celebrity player. But before we get to that, he brought a Holocaust denier to the State of the Union, right? And said he didn't know about his past.
Yes. Yeah. No, I'm sure he didn't know about his past.
So what's going on at that point, Ron? We're at 10:00 on Saturday night.
I'm actually in the car driving to get dinner from one of our local, restaurants that's trying to stay afloat by doing takeout.
Right.
And I'm looking at my fucking thing, and he's still coming at me, and I'm starting to feel like this is no longer challenging, because the guy is clearly like, there's something really fucked up about his wiring when he keeps getting punched in the face and keeps wanting to come back for more, knowing that he's going to get punched again. So now I feel like I'm actually helping him in his sick, twisted, fetish-oriented kind of like sense of getting pleasure out of being punished.
He's punching up. I mean, he's got about 500,000 followers on Twitter. You're now after this, you're close to you're tapping on 1 million. You're close to 1 million. So I think the old rule is don't punch down or don't feed the trolls. But here, everybody understands probably why you engaged here. You chose to engage, and you're going back and forth with Gaetz. And then, do you go to bed that night? Did you sleep that night? You got your takeout, and what was that night like?
I thought buzz off past your bedtime was clear. Like, regardless of what you send me, that's it. I'm done. And we have our evening, we eat our dinner, we have our, couple of cocktails, and, watch a couple episodes of, The Sopranos, which is the show that I'm currently catching up on. My coronavirus viewing has afforded me catching up with a great deal of great stuff that I was never able to watch in real time. And I'm figuring it's done. And, at about 10:00, 10:30, I get in bed, and there's, the tweet of my dreams, Ted Cruz.
So hold on, let's go before we get to that.
Yeah.
What else have you been watching? Sopranos, and what else has not been have you not been able to watch until now? And you never appeared in Sopranos, did you? I feel like that would have been a perfect show for you to have some kind of dastardly role in.
Never appeared in The Sopranos.
What else have you been binging or watching during the
I
pandemic?
watched all of Homeland, which is for somebody who is, a political junkie. That's a quintessential conflagration of phenomenal storytelling, great production value, great acting, and having their finger on the pulse of the movers and shakers who lurk in the shadows and who are having more of an impact on our daily lives than anybody is, able to even comprehend. So that was like 8 seasons. That kept me busy for a minute. I'm only able to, what with the drinking and everything, I'm only able to get
Nice.
3 episodes a night in tops. So
your phone is dinging. I don't know. This would be very, very fun if during this, if these guys continue to engage us. But
I'm really surprised I haven't heard from Jim Jordan yet.
Not yet, but I'm sure he'll be sending a fundraising email off of you in some way, shape, or form at some point. Nice. I mean, they don't realize also, and I said this to you, and we'll get to this later, I don't think they realized necessarily who they were engaging with, because your popularity, as a fan, as a friend, as a guy who's had you on my show, your popularity spans, right? I mean, you've got the Sons of Anarchy crowds, and then you've got the really diehard, like the comic book folks who are into Hellboy, right? And then you go way, way back to like Beauty and the Beast, right? So like, literally my mom, me, my son, all different generations and different demographics and politics know you and your work. Do you think they knew that when they picked a fight with you on Twitter?
It defies logic. It definitely defies logic when, okay, you come at me and, you're gathering all your little tropes, your little Hollywood dog whistle and your little, like, you piece of shit. You talk about gun control and how you hate violence, and you play Clay Morrow on Sons of Anarchy for 8 seasons. It was 6 seasons, but I like to pad my resume still to this day. But anyway, I felt like he thought that there was gold in them there hills. There was something that would resonate with the people who he wants to pull the wool over, and so that was what probably instigated the initial foray into this. But when the first thing that the guy who you're coming after says to you, it's really fun to play an asshole on television. Let me ask you, sir, what's it like to actually be one? And you keep coming back. There's something going down there that's like,
well, it's arrogance, right? Like that's part of what you reveal is this arrogance. It's the guys who don't wear jackets to hearings. It's the guys who refuse to wear masks. Matt Gaetz, I got a bone to pick with him, because this is the guy who organized a group of representatives to storm a skiff room at the White House, which is a secure room, yes, right, where you generally discuss national security and confidential issues. They right. stormed it in this political stunt. He's the same guy who wore the gas mask in a hearing. He's a provocateur. Like he's right. trying to get those likes. He's trying to get that traction on Fox. He's kind of built a name for himself doing that, right? And he hasn't been in Congress long. I think since 2017. It seems like he's constantly auditioning for a Fox News show. And so he engages with you. You watch The Sopranos. You go to bed, and you wake up. And
you don't wake up.
You don't wake up. I go to bed. 12:40 Eastern time. 12:48 a.m. Right? Ted Cruz pops in, and I'm not going to do a Ted Cruz voice, but he says, "Listen, Hellboy, you talk good game when you got Hollywood makeup and stuntmen, but I'll pay $10,000 to the non-political charity of choice that you couldn't last 5 minutes in a wrestling ring with Jim Jordan without getting pinned. You up for it? Or does your publicist say, too risky?" And you wrote back, "I'll tell you what, Teddy boy, since mentioning Jim Jordan in wrestling is problematic, why don't we say fuck him and just make it you and me? I'll give $50K to Black Lives Matter, and you can keep all the taxpayer money you were thinking of spending." So now Ted Cruz is tapping in. What's going on in your house and mind when this happens?
I thought I was out of saliva. It starts flowing all over me. I said, this is really too fucking good. Because if there's two TV villains who happen to be, in suits representing, the American public, in legislative garb, that you want to fuck with, it's Matt Gaetz, little bitch, little rich little bitch whose daddy did everything for him, including pay for. This is the one thing he doesn't mention. Those 3 times he got elected, he ran unopposed. He still needed his dad's money to win, even running unopposed. But anyway, getting back to, and then there's Ted Cruz, who every single sniveling, smarmy piece of shit thing that comes out of his mouth, you want to punch him right in the fucking face. And I don't think it's politically correct to actually say that these days anymore, but since it's just you and me, you really want to punch them up. And there he comes right into my living room. And I'm going, I turn to my girl and I go, what is it with these people? This is like, are they for real? They actually think that this is smart politics to like go up against a guy who, let's face it. I mean, at being 70 years old, I technically retired 5 years ago. I have nothing left to prove to the world at all. Everything I do right now is like, pure labor of love and like shit that I never could say when I was younger and gave a shit about careers and what my station was in Hollywood. Let her rip, baby. And he's already seen this go down all day long with Matt Gaetz, and he comes right in. And, it's now late and I'm a little buzzed. So, I come out with like a nice 1-2 punch. Is this really Ted Cruz, the guy who, little Donnie called his wife a dog and called his father and now kisses? Can I get your autograph? And then he challenges me to the thing with Jim Jordan. And I said what you read. And I went to sleep. And I didn't know when I woke up, there'd be more Ted Cruz waiting for me.
Ted Cruz says, I get you're rich, can't take the heat, need to get a manicure. What were you thinking when Ted Cruz was asking about your manicure?
He also mentioned I should check with my publicist about something. Was that in the other tweet?
I don't know. Might have been. Yeah.
My favorite thing is when anyone assumes how much money you have because you're an actor. That's my favorite thing. So right off the bat, him and me are like, we're really ready to be, on even footing. And the other thing is, of course, I don't have a publicist. So, but it was like, again, the almost too good to be true, in a lot of ways, because here's another, the bases are loaded, it's bottom of the ninth, and some guy comes in and throws hanging curveballs, it's like, are you kidding me? I mean, Jesus. But the fact that it ended the way it ended on Saturday night, and then I wake, or was it Sunday night? I can't even remember. And then I wake up Monday morning, and there's more Ted with the same old hackneyed kind of like, you Hollywood elitists, you and your manicures and your publicists and your this and your that, and your bleeding heart, tree hugging bullshit. It's they deal in these. Everything is sort of marketed, like there's no humanity there. There's no dealing with humans like they're humans, which opens up the door, as far as I'm concerned, to like saying, listen, if only one of us is going to, cover the humanity portion of this conversation, I guess it's going to have to be me. So that's kind of what I was thinking.
And then he throws in, he volunteers Jordan to wrestle you, which I can't let that go, right? Like I got to give you a chance to expand on that. So, you basically said, let's get back to business. Jim Jordan's too easy, just a little bitch. And then you touched on something important.
No. Before that one
was
when I actually responded to the fact that he challenged me to a wrestling match, but not with him.
Right, with another guy. You said, Teddy, what kind of motherfucker offers to have another guy, probably asleep at the time, kick another guy's ass?
Which is the question America seems to be asking, because, you know, in the aftermath of all this, that's one of those resonant moments of this exchange that the Twitterverse seemed to really enjoy, like revisiting, like, and the artwork that's been flowing in of, you know, of people's representation of Ted Cruz challenging me to a fight, but not with him, but with a guy who's asleep at the time, who has no idea, you know, his name is being intoned.
And to a wrestling match, which is a choice, probably not a place that Jordan wants to go, right? Given his strange connections to wrestling. He's a former wrestling coach, right?
Right.
And then there were, you know, allegations that he knew about, you know, potential assaults or impropriety that were happening in the school he was coaching, but probably not something Jordan wants to bring up or challenge, right? Like he would much rather play, you know, beer pong or parcheesi or rummy cube or something if it was going to be a challenge against you, probably not wrestling, right?
Right. Which was something else we implied, which, you know, I would have been happy if there was some sort of a debate on the merits, but it was just a bunch. And the takeaway from all of this is, well, part of the takeaway, because there's a lot to unpack, but is there is no engaging. There's just a bunch of, it seems like there's a bunch of landmines being planted for him to cash in on, that he hopes I step on, that will gain him some sort of, so everything is in complete political capital kind of currency, where it's all about who can score points. But for me, who's a guy who's been watching Ted Cruz walk through, you know, his neighborhoods in New York and have nothing but disparaging things to say about New York and the slime and the grit, you know, and like, you know, all of the bullshit that spews out of him. This was an opportunity for me to talk man to man. And I loved it. I mean, I loved it. I didn't love it to the point where I wanted to turn it into a career or anything like that.
Right.
You know, there's so long you can get down and roll around in the shit before you start smelling like it, you know?
Yeah. So the thing I want to drill down on is there's this idea that, you know, it's the old tough guy thing. It's like, you know, my dad will beat up your dad, or I could beat you up. It's so juvenile and it's so petty. And it seems to be consistent, right? I mean, these are guys who take pages out of Trump's playbook, where he's, you know, a fake tough guy, you know, getting into an argument with somebody like Jim Mattis, who is a, you know, bona fide war hero and a decorated Marine, right? And so there's this idea that they're going to co-opt toughness, and they're tougher than you. And he takes on you, who's a Hollywood tough guy, but you're also, you know, you're a guy who's made your way to where you are on grit and on hard work. And you didn't come from Beverly Hills. I mean, you worked your way up through that. So can you talk about, you know, just your view on this kind of the toxicity that exists right now, and this ridiculous idea of what strength is, and the fact that these guys were actually using that and trying to use you to further that kind of a demented agenda?
Well, I mean, you know, it's actually heartbreaking to see what passes for manhood in this environment. And it's equally heartbreaking to see what passes for the claim of what's patriotism and what's not patriotism. And, you know, it's one of the saddest times, I think, probably, you know, in a century, because it's turned into this game, this you know, these people are using a twisted version of Americanism, which is nothing short of fascism, nothing short of, you know, third-rate banana republic fascism, and parading it as if it's part of the sinew that the founders were referring to when they defined how we were going to be as compared to everyone else. And it's very heartbreaking. It's playing to a crowd that has already, and I think you and I have talked about this on many occasions, but it's playing to a crowd that in a lot of ways have been kind of left behind by globalism, by the internet, by the fact that, the things that would have supported them 40 or 50 years ago that they could have raised kids with and retired with dignity are gone, and they have all of this pent up anger and rage, and it's being exploited by these guys knowingly. That's the part of it that's diabolical, that's unforgivable. Guys like Ted Cruz know exactly what the fuck he's doing. Trump, we'll get to in a second, because I can't, as obsessed with him as I am, there's a lot about him that I just can't figure out, because I used to think that he had no core, but I've changed that. He does have a core. It's all hate. It's all wrapped in what he missed as a kid growing up. I don't want to switch my psychiatrist hat on, but I mean, it's obvious. And what I wanted to point out earlier when we were talking about how these guys kept coming back for more, and it was clearly punishment. I mean, if you looked at their attacks on me and you looked at the responses, it was like, you really want to stand in the middle of the ring, not even do a rope-a-dope, just let your fucking head get pummeled like this and turn into a bloody pulp? And it makes you, the one thing that I do know about Trump is that he is obsessed with negative attention. If there's any calculus to the image that he puts out, it's that he almost strategically makes sure that he's the most reviled man in the world, because as long as he's getting attention, and that's obviously the only attention he was able to get. This is like my because I did take one semester of psychology at Lehman College in the Bronx, so I think I really know about this shit.
Yep.
But
shout out to the Boogie Down Bronx. Yeah,
it's got to be that, because that's every day you think that he's gone as low as he can go, and he figures out a way to go lower because he got all the attention he could out of the lowest he went yesterday.
Right.
And so it's not as if like he signed some bullshit thing yesterday because there's a gazillion people in the streets, finally having had it with, the result of what's it called? Systemized racism. What's the word? What's the term?
Systematic racism.
Systematic racism.
Yeah.
Is spewing out of it, and that's a whole other. We could spend a whole other.
So hour. let me. I want to come back to Trump in a second, but let's finish this, right? So ultimately, you said to him, forget the wrestling. I'll give $50,000 to Black Lives Matter, and you can keep all the taxpayer money. But and then he went dark, right? And it seems like they haven't responded to you since, in the last couple of days. I mean, what do you think is? It feels to me like they realize they kind of hit a third rail. That this isn't good for them. That it's probably, maybe a political consultant pulled him on the side and said, do you really know what shows this guy is on? Do you know who watches him? Do you know who follows him? And it seems like they've pulled back on that. So what happens next? You're going to continue to throw punches. I asked you this last time, but now the urgency is even greater. Would you ever run for mayor of New York? Or would you go down in Florida and primary Gaetz, or move down to Florida and take on Cruz?
No, I mean, you know, God bless you, Paul. I love you so much for even, you know, having it cross your mind that I would consider doing these things, or that
you could do mayor, man. You could definitely do mayor.
Yeah,
I mean,
you know, we talked about this on the.
Can't be any worse than de Blasio. There's no way anybody could be worse than de Blasio.
I mean, you know, I'm having such a great time in my career right now. I mean, I really, really love making movies and making television, and the role of being in a position where I'm among the storytellers, because that's a category in and of itself. Storytellers, you know, you see them in our literature, you see them in all of the offshoots of our need to communicate with each other so that we understand that there's a commonality to what we're all going through. More that we have in common than that we have apart. And when storytelling, you know, began to find a footing in the day-to-day of our, you know, slog, the reason why I feel like it became so revered is because it's to answer your question, no, I'm not running for shit. I love being an actor. I love being a storyteller. I really, really love the impact that if I happen to be in something, because I've been in a lot of real stuff I wouldn't even fucking watch. I wouldn't recommend anybody to watch. But every once in a while you hit on something that resonates and that's good. And you see people's reactions, and you see how, with all the bullshit you and I are discussing here, you know, about solving the world's problems, you get into a discussion like that, and you watch people just kind of like levitate a little bit.
Yeah.
Like forget the bullshit, forget their differences, forget their problems, forget who they hate, who they love, and why and how. And just like, oh man, there was a moment in that thing, you did that thing that was so fucking, you know, and like, to me, that's the office that I'm most willing to serve in.
Can I ask, Ron, can I ask you one last thing before we wrap up that I think is important? You and I have talked about this a little bit offline about how important this moment is. And in the pod in the last couple of weeks, I've talked about how, you know, Black Lives Matter has really changed the country, right? And the trajectory, and it's a turning point. But the important role of white voices, right? Of white leaders, of white organizers, right? In showing and changing the idea that this is just a Black movement. It's a multiracial movement. You're a guy who grew up in New York. You understand race in ways that people probably don't know looking at you. But do you have any thoughts on this moment and on Black Lives Matter based off your life experience, which is really extensive, and anything that you want to share with folks that you think is important?
I mean, you and I had a beautiful conversation yesterday about what it is that fundamentally makes us the angry Americans, that makes us get up every morning, turn on the news, and then figure out ways to spew on that and riff on that. And, you know, it's this recognition of how vast injustice takes place in this world, and how justice is not always received by the people who deserve it most. If there's any one thing that is the giant metaphor for all injustice, it's the original sin of going to a country and stealing an entire race of people and bringing them here and kicking their fucking teeth in and making them work for free to build the United States. And then when they all got done doing that, figuring out a way to keep the slavery going on some other set of levels. by keeping the ghetto going, by jailing, if you look at the statistics of who's going to jail for what crimes, it is systemic, this tribal impulse that we have of needing to feel as white men and women that we're the master race, that we're the Aryans. And there's nothing that makes you feel like that than having something that you can really hold down. And that's at the core of this thing that's exploding in our faces right now, is that there's just, it's heartbreakingly unjust what the Black experience has been when it comes to, their American history. And so we as not just white people, but I hate to categorize anybody with a conscience, anybody who cares about justice is obligated to shine a light on how intolerable that disparity is, and how we're never ever going to have any kind of fairness or justice, or live up to, we the people in many one, all of those beautiful epithets that were part of the Constitution, until all men are created equal was not just something that all those white guys who were writing that, who all owned slaves, were writing for themselves, but it applies to all of us.
Yep.
And my whole thing, is merit. If somebody deserves to rise in the society and go spread his wings as far as they could go, there should not be any predisposition. What do they call it in the Obamacare? Pre-existing condition. Pre-existing condition that makes for there to be two sets of standards, or more than two, but definitely two. And I know you want to go, but I have a question for you. It's like the George Floyd thing, which was the tinder that lit the fire, that we're now 29 days into having people on the streets or something like that, which I've never seen in my lifetime. One of my early tweets and all this was, this moment we're living in is the official end of the 48-hour news cycle, where at the end of which you shake your head and go, oh, and then go about your business and nothing changes. It seems as though there's a real opportunity here for some strange reason, even though we've seen it over and over and over again, with George Zimmerman, and with so many guys getting shot in the back for doing nothing, with guys, having fucking bags of cocaine dropped in their shirt, and a cop going, look, you're holding, Well, we've seen it over, but why now? What is it about this atmosphere? What is it about this climate? This is something that I ask myself a lot lately, where we finally said, you know what? Enough. You want to beat our fucking heads in? You're going to have to beat us all in. You're going to have to beat us all in. And all those beautiful people who are out on the streets, they're white, they're brown, they're yellow, they're red. And a lot of them are getting their heads beaten.
Yep.
And they keep coming out. And it's a beautiful fucking thing. And I don't know why it's now, but I'm grateful for it. And I feel as though this is an opportunity. If we don't really, really make systemic change now, we're never going to make it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm with you on that. I mean, why now? Why this? I don't know. I mean, historians will unpack it, but just the confluence of events of the repeated killings, the public nature of them, compounded by Trump and Trumpism, and compounded by the pandemic that disproportionately impacts Black people and people of color. I mean, it all came together in a perfect storm, if you will, or like a transformational storm. And we're still understanding. I think your point about the 48-hour, 24-hour, 72-hour news cycle this kind of blowing that apart. I think it's really important. I think that's right. Because it's not over. It just and that's movement, right? It continues to evolve, and it continues to morph, and it continues to move forward. And that's true movement change in the framework of the civil rights movement and so many others. So this is more than a moment. It's a movement, and it's a culmination of movements that came together in a moment that could be, the new normal, right? In the same way the pandemic is the new normal, today, Reed Hastings donated $120 million to historic Black colleges. Like the transformational changes, the corporate changes that are happening, and the speed at which they're happening is surprising and so long overdue. I mean, today, Mitch McConnell said he's open to changing the names of military bases named after Confederate generals and traitors. I mean, the idea that would have happened a couple of weeks ago was unimaginable, but it's a testament to the activists. That's where I go back to, Ron. Like, it's a testament to the activists who are on the front lines. It's not about the politicians. It's not about the people running for president. It's about the activists and the organizers and the folks who get their heads beat in, and the folks who take a step forward and push for change. The cops who raised a hand and turn in their partners who are doing the wrong thing, right? It's on all sides, and it's happening, and it's inspiring. I mean, it's given us some hope for the future, but you got to go through that shit to get there. And so I want to ask you to talk about one last thing, because it's Father's Day coming up. You're a dad. You've played a dad. Any wisdom or thoughts as Father's Day approaches?
All I ever really wanted, at the end of the day, of course, I want every kid to find something that he loves as much as I love what I do. And then he'll never work a day in his life. That's important. So if you can instill in your kids the importance, the urgency of finding something that you do better than anybody else and that you love so much that you would do it for free, that's job one. For guys like you and me, I realized early on, the only thing I can leave my kids is their ability to say, my old man, he didn't leave anything in the bag. He stood for shit. Sometimes he got his head bashed in, but he stood for something. And if you can teach your kids that we're all responsible for whatever world we're living in, that none of us ever, ever, ever should seek solace in victimhood or blaming it on a system that doesn't work, but instead rolling up your sleeves and saying, how can I help? What can I do today that moves the needle a little bit? I'm not sure that was your question.
No, that's it, man. That's the right note to
that's how I'm feeling about parenthood and
no, that's it, man.
My children are I married a Black lady. My children are Black, and I really, their experience is way different than mine, and it's been incredibly eye-opening. And
can I ask you, Ron, how many times has it happened in your life where white people are talking to you, not knowing you have Black kids? I mean, that's a very unique experience. I mean, most of the time, right? When
all the time, except for a tiny little group of people who are my friends who know me, but no, because I've always kept my personal life as my personal life. None of it's ever made it into the press, and deliberately. Yeah, I've heard every kind of joke you can tell. Yeah, good old boy shit. Like acting like I'm one of them, and yeah. Very few people know that's my that's my history. That's my.
I mean, I think it underscores why this is, I think, an important moment for your voice. Why, your patriotism and your creativity and your take no shit attitude, and you don't take yourself too seriously in an environment where so many people do. It's refreshing. It's inspiring. You keep it real. I love how you represent for New York. I'm grateful for your friendship. I'm grateful for your activism. You and I are cooking some stuff up. So I tell people to stay tuned. I'm excited to do more with you. When you came on last time, I did not get to do the presentation of the gifts, which kind of came a little bit afterwards. So I'm going to do it quickly, right? And you don't know. So you got some Angry Americans gear, which you have, right? And you were, I think, our first celebrity endorser. You were great. You rocked the Angry Americans gear. So I'm going to get you some more of that. We have the Bravo Sierra gift pack that'll be coming your way. You know, military-inspired grooming and wellness stuff. You got some deodorant and some antibacterial wipes in case you do have to wrestle with any dirty politicians. You'll be able to cleanse yourself thoroughly afterward. And then I've been giving out Uncle Nearest because of the great story of Nearest Green and our friend Jeffrey Wright. So that is the appropriate American whiskey, I think, to give to you. And you didn't get the Peeps question. You didn't get the Peeps question because I think it started after I had you on the first time. So, Ron Perlman, 3 colors of Peeps, pink, blue, yellow. Which color would you choose and why?
First of all, give me a little background. Like, what are Peeps?
Peeps, you know what Peeps are. Like, you know, the these things, the yellow. I'm showing the screen right now for the folks who want to check the video later. The Easter candies that look like, you know, soft congressmen. If you were gonna eat them, you've seen them in a. I
have eaten them actually.
No doubt.
And I don't know. I don't know why. You know, for some strange reason, we'll have to analyze this later on. But you know, yellow.
That's it. That's it.
I go for the yellow Peeps.
That's it. So the bonus question for repeat visitors to the show, a show I use when I host on the radio sometimes. This is a quick one. Pancakes or waffles? If you had to pick pancakes or waffles, which one would you pick?
Pancakes.
Why?
Great memories of making them with my old man.
There you go.
Pancakes. He taught me how to eat pancakes. He taught me how much butter to put on, where, between, underneath, how much syrup to put on. We had some great times eating pancakes.
That's it. That's a perfect.
I don't have anything against waffles, but that's an emotional kind of recall.
I love it. There is no third party option in that choice. I think it's a great ending to a Father's Day conversation. I so appreciate you sitting down with us to take us on this wild journey you're on and going forward. My dear friend, Ron Perlman, you are a great American. You are a great inspiration, and I can't wait to see what comes next.
You are a great American, and I love you, Paul. I really do. Thank you for all the generosity, for letting me kind of draft off of you, if you will, every once in a while.
Anytime, my man. Anytime. And if you need a tag team partner, look, I'm not fucking around. Me, like you and me against, Cruz and Gaetz. Like, just tell them you're tapping me in.
I don't know if you want to make that announcement because I'll never get another tweet again.
I'm ready, man. I'm ready for the wrestling match. I'm ready for the ping pong match. I'll play them in Rummy Cube. I've been playing a lot of Rummy Cube in the pandemic, man. And, all proceeds go to Black Lives Matter or to other charities, man.
Beautiful.
Ladies and gentlemen, the great and powerful Ron Perlman, live from the arena everywhere he is, whether it's in a car, in LA, or on Twitter. He's fighting the good fight. The great and powerful Ron Perlman, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, sir.